So welcome to Buddy's Designs. This is a live stream with live peoples having a natter in chat. I'm playing in my Mythomorphia colour book by Kirby Roseanne. And I bought mine at Amazon and it arrived on the 1st of April, so I thought it was an April Fool's, but it's in French, so I presume the French had permission to release it a little bit earlier. I didn't expect it till the second week in April. So my other little purchase has been some Inktense blocks. So I think I did an unboxing of these when they arrived, I think. And Derwent have put made a slight change to them, so they've put them in these little foam cradles, which are not designed to be taken out, but I actually quite like using them on my desk here on a flat surface. You couldn't really pick these up and not expect them to snap, but I've taken them out of their original trays that have these wells. These are designed to do watercolour washes. So you scrape a bit of colour in here, add water, and you have a wash. Now, it's not often we do washes in our colour books. I don't particularly, but I do a different kind of wash. I'm scratching colour on and then going over it with a brush. And they've also put a piece of cardboard in there as well, so when you pick the top layer up, it's not going to bend, and so all these are protected. But I've just laid them out flat, so they're easier to get out. Excuse me. So what I'm using my little book for is, in here I have Inktense pencils, scratched in squares and the full 72 range. And I use them from here because you've got more control from a paper palette. But I'm also using them because the Inktense pencils, the numbers and the colours are identical to the blocks. So I'm using this as a colour guide because some of these are quite dark and it's difficult to see what potential they have. So I've picked out the greys especially. They all look very similar, but when you pick them out, we've got a Payne's grey, which is bluey, and we've got neutral, charcoal grey and Chinese, and also we have a couple of Indian ink and sepia, and they're kind of brown and warm. They're a cold brown but a warm grey. Now I love making my own greys, but for this particular thing I'm using this, and so I've chosen the Indian ink, so it's a warm background. But I thought I'd kind of like have some shadows on her, and she could be like a little bit like the black Labradors. They're black but they have a blue tint to them, and I thought the Payne's grey might give that. So I've got a piece of paper, just photocopy paper. I use it for the edges, so if you put it under the first page it protects all the others. And I also use it for over the top, because although these aren't pastel, a little bit does rub off on you because I'm doing it a different way. I'm putting the colour down first and then I'm going to activate it with a wet brush. So you need, and it's also good practice, to always put a paper under your hand because you have natural oils in your hand and it can change your colours. So just to be on the safe side, it's a good idea. Oh right, so Derwent I've only just done this this foam, so they were a bit flimsy. I think it was a plastic container that they had this, but it was in plastic, but it didn't protect the crayons, the pastels, the crayons, whichever you want to call them. But I mean, if I went like that it would just snap. They're very similar in texture to hard pastels. They're a little bit harder than a hard pastel, but when you're scratching with them, that's kind of what you're getting, a cross between a Caran d'Ache colour 2 or an art bar or a pastel, a hard pastel. So they do rub off a little bit, but they're very quick to do a big background or to do a big area. So again, that's what I thought I would like. So I'm just using the edge and a corner to scratch a little bit of colour where we've got some hatching and cross hatching to show shadow. And where there's nothing, I'm not putting anything, because when I use my water brush I can get a watercolour effect if I just manipulate the colour with a damp brush. So where the colour is going to be very dark, very deep, dense colour, and where there is no colour, the brush is going to push a lovely soft highlight, and there's going to be nothing else to do. It's going to be just really, really easy. So small areas I'm using a corner, other areas I'm using a little bit, and there's very little pressure as well, so you've got pulley hands. They're kind of fairly easy to use, which again is quite good. All the hard work is done with a damp brush. So I'll just move my colours up a bit. Is that now, Suzanne, or is that in a little while? So, I've not done this before, so it's a new experience, but this is how I work with the pastels and the pencils. I use the Inktense pencils like this, scratch a bit of colour, and they're not very, but they're a little bit stronger than if you just had excuse me, than if you just had using it from a paper palette. So this is a very pale way of working, this is a very vivid way of working. Oh yes, thank you. Sorry about that. Yes, pop the link in and then everybody can follow on. But sometimes I get a bit carried away, so I'm not sure when I'm so I'll scratch. I'm going to leave that part, I think. Put all those sugars on there. But I can go back into it once it's completely dry, probably the next day. You really need to dry out before you touch it because you'll wreck the pages, they will just stick into it. So if I want to go back in just to give it a little bit more of a shadow, you can't really do highlights, you can do shadows, and you can get a little bit more colour on top. So I would think she's nearly done now, so I'm going to do some butterflies, so you see some royal blue butterflies. And you really don't want a lot of colour. And green beetle, possibly green beetle. And I say the beauty of this is you can just pick up a colour and scratch what you want. And I thought these would look quite good if they were kind of really bright. And because it's a corner, you can actually get in there quite well. I do apologise. So sorry about that. Sorry. Sorry about that, I didn't see. Oh dear. Sorry guys. Hi Dazzle Desires. Thanks for stopping by. Anybody else is popping in? Yes, sorry. Duh. I must have put it on mute when I coughed. Sorry. I had a coughing fit, so I put it on mute. I do apologise. Hubby's just brought me a new pot of tea. So I've got all my colours scratched in. So I'm going to zoom in and then that's not my first bloomer of the day, but there'll be more probably. Oh, hello Bookworm, welcome to Bunny's Designs. Still having a place. I'll zoom in and then you can see all the scribble. And it is really scribble, but sorry, yes, you were shouting at me. Sorry about that. Yeah, I suddenly started to cough and sneeze, so I just turned the volume off and then I forgot to put it back. Oopsie! Sack the sound man. So this bit I've activated with a brush, but the colours I haven't. So I've just scribbled a little bit of colour. I haven't done the other thing at the bottom. I think it's a tree stump. But all these have just got a tiny bit of scribble. But of course, once you touch it with a brush, it's going to come to life. So start in the top corner. Oh, did you get the? Yes, I've never had the full set, but I love them, I have to say. But I've been rather naughty. I've taken them out of the box and they're sitting next to me. But I'm enjoying working with them like this, scratching the colour on, which is something a bit different for me. So I'm actually going to go to a number 1 brush, the tiny brush, and just need another piece of paper. Because you will smudge this now. Oops, I've just torn the page. Oopsie. So in this top corner here, there's a tiny bit of purple. But once you activate it, you're going to get a very, very beautiful colour. And of course our dreaded, hated middles. So now we've got a yellow bug. And I'm actually dunking this brush as I would normally, and then manipulating it. So where there's colour is very vibrant and where there isn't. So there's a little bit of a variation, and again I quite like that as well. So I'm going to use the yellow that I have on the brush. Remember, these are Inktense, they're very vibrant, and just put a bit of colour on the body. And so we can get some quite natural. Oh, sorry, bark alert. Sorry. Oh gosh, it goes through you, doesn't it? Sorry. Oh, Fees, be quiet. So there's a bit of a millipede up there. I'm just going to get to him as well. So this is a very quick way to use them. So what you could do is put all the scratched colours in there, put a piece of photocopy paper over the top and shut the book and do several pages, and then when you're out and about, you've got your water brush, you can then just colour. Sorry about Alfie, gosh. You could. Oh, sorry, I do apologise. Alfie, what's this? Come here, good boy. Good boy. Thank you. Sorry about that. It's a madhouse. It's a mad animal house. It's not a mad rat house. It's just a madhouse. All the animals here have been rescued, and if they leave here, it's goodnight Vienna. So we're the last hotel standing, as I call it. So apologies, but even the vets mentioned the fact that, are all your animals kind of broken? Yes. We are the last man standing. I really like that blue. So I'm going to look to see if I've got something that hasn't got any colour on it. So I'm going to do this blue body. And because they're Inktense, we've got a lot of colour about. If I just move these now, I can move the page across. You can see probably what I'm doing slightly better. So the beauty of a watercolour brush is you can squeeze it, get the water and twist until there's nothing there. So sometimes that's quite nice. A little bit wetter than I'd like to be, but it's very quick, it's quite easy, and you get some nice effects, so you can't really grumble about it. And I'm going to go in there with a bit smaller brush, because there's no point going in there with that brush. So we'll do our little bee, and then we can put a bit of shading on his body a bit later. And then we've got this butterfly to do. That's a little bit wetter than I'd like to be, but very quick, and you can do this out and about. So I'm going to take that blue and just push it through those wings, because that's given a bit of a, it's got rid of the see-through blue of the bee. So once you start with this brush, it's very quick. I would like to keep drying the damn thing because it's just a bit too wet, but these are small areas, so it's not that bad. And there's the spider that we haven't done. There's a little spider there. And I just keep drying the brush to keep it as barely damp as I can. I can go over there with a different colour. So I've got another butterfly there. So I'm going to do the blue first and then take it into the maroon. That would have worked slightly better if it had been a drier brush, but I keep drying it, it's not getting any drier. Just do the middle, just to take that colour off it. So she's going to have quite a lot. Yes, I was going to ask you to tell him off, Suzanne. Suzanne's dog's been naughty. Alfie belongs to Suzanne. You keep threatening to send him over the pond because he's such a bad boy, and he's in the doghouse because he kept us awake all night. So I really want that to be cleaned because I want this very vivid, bright ladybird. so you can get some quite pale colours as well. And that's all with a little scratch of colour, so I kind of like that. They look quite good, those little bugs. If it's a very small space, I'm going to go in with my little tiny brush, which is kicking about somewhere. And you get them in the little Cotman sets, the little tiny silver brushes, which mine has disappeared. Typical, mine's disappeared. Oopsie. So we've got quite a few coloured bugs. I've got a little head to do there, but when I go in with this grey, I'm going to go into there. I think, can't find that little brush anywhere. It's very tiny. I do have a spare one in here, do I? This is what I take with me if I take my little book. I've got these little travel brushes, and I've got a little water pot, and they fit quite nicely in there. So there's this one which is quite small. Sorry, I said water brush, it's just a little travel brush. So that would be small enough to get into small spaces. And I treated myself to one of these. So they're quite nice because they make quite a nice handle. They're very light, so you could do that quite easily. So again, just moving this about, so when it's darkest, and there's a fair bit of colour on here, so I'm just going to kind of go over certain things. Oh yes, Suzanne says she loves bugs that can be very pretty. Yep, ladybugs are pretty. And bumblebees. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with these next, but I did like the idea that she was kind of a blue-black grey. I'm not working too wet. I've actually found another little bug here, look. An ant. So I may do this a bit darker, we'll see what happens. Just have a slurp of hot tea. Has anybody got any questions? Yes, Suzanne says her baby. Yes, he's in the doghouse though, Suzanne. He's always in the doghouse. He's in the doghouse. So thanks for stopping by, guys. I hope everybody's okay. Oopsie, thank you for watching on YouTube. This is a live show with live peeps having a natter in chat. And with live Alfie having a bit of a whinge. This is recorded for Ustream.tv and also for YouTube, for people to watch at their leisure. So if you're watching on YouTube, thank you for watching. If you have any requests or suggestions, please add them in the comments below. YouTube has now got quite a good app that lets you know if you get comments, because sometimes you can forget you didn't get very good reminders, but you do now. So if anybody wants anything or wants to see anything again, or if I'd forgotten to say anything, please ask. Again, reminds me of magic colouring when we were children. We scratch the colour and away we go. Oh yes, that sounds good. So you've got a Princeton brush, a liner and a monogram. The other good ones are what the script. Sometimes they're called script paintbrushes, and they're very, very long and very thin because they were designed for doing scripture. And so if you're halfway through a long word, you're not going to run out. Very similar to the riggers. The idea is that you kind of it's not going to run out. You're going to have a continuous line, and that's why it works quite well. And the design of the watercolour brush is very similar. It's designed to give you a constant supply of a water. So you get a really nice, oopsie, if you manipulate it down here, you get a nice watercolour effect. Because obviously at the top of her hand she needs a light. So that's why I say it's always easier to do this and then go back and put the low lights and the shadows in afterwards. It's very difficult to put a highlight in after the event. Almost impossible. Now, I would have liked her claws a bit of a different colour, but I think I'll live with that. Just take that up there. So I quite like the blue-black. I think it's going to stand out. Oh yes, are they short? Yeah, but if they're very fine, I think I have 20 zeros, but you can. But the best thing to do, and no dogs need to be damaged in this, is by accident I'd stood on the hairs of the dog on his tail, and he stood up, and as I stood up, he stood up, and he pulled away from me, of course, and I had my full weight, so I pulled half a dozen hairs off his tail, purely by accident. And that lent me so that when I did my very fine oil painting, if you have a wire-haired dog, you can use a dog hair. And I got the idea, but as I say, it was an accident. But I'd cut a tiny piece off the end of his tail. He was not going to bother, he's got tons. And I got the idea because there's a gentleman, I've forgotten his name, because I was looking at miniatures when I was at uni, that's why I kind of had my thing about. And he painted, one of the gentlemen I was watching painted with the hair from a fly's back. He painted under a microscope. Now I didn't get that far, but I did paint with a dog hair, so that the fine work that I did for the whispers, when you have books, the old-fashioned books were sewn, and a lot were done with material rather than and the stitching frayed, and so I painted with a dog hair for my final degree piece. Oh, sorry, Till a Light wasn't the final, it was the year before. I should have actually carried on doing that, just done painting, but I was very poorly and I was kind of not really thinking. So I kind of made a bit of a mess of my degree, but never mind. So one of mine's if I can find it, one of my paintings, so I did that about 5 years ago, but my hands are so bad now I can't paint. If you bear with me 2 seconds, I shall find my... So you can paint with anything, and if you want a fine brush, buy a cheapy one and cut all the bristles off it and just leave 1 or 2 left. You know, you can do it that way. I wouldn't do it with your fine brushes, but I only paint with cheaper brushes anyway. Watercolouring is different, but watercolour is very difficult. It's not easy, isn't watercolour? I did find quite a lot of inspiration. These stone walls in Ireland, I just love the colours. So I took quite a lot of photographs in Ireland because I thought I might try to do some more painting. Because my thumb is slightly better. Let's see if I can find my painting. Probably can't. Too many pictures of bunnies. The vet was very surprised we saved the bunnies, by the way. He was very surprised when I said that she'd fed them, but we took them away from her. And this is my daughter's watercolour sketch she did of our black cats. And that's done with a Caran d'Ache Neocolor 2s, but they're old. They're not called Caran d'Ache Neocolor 2s, the big fat chunks. And she had a black and a white in her hand and a brush, and she was just dibbing into the blacks and the whites. So Samantha's very good at colouring and drawing. And so's Amy. Grandma had to laugh. Grandma said, "Oh, you used to be good at art," bearing in mind she's at art school. She used to be good at art. I'm trying to find the picture that I painted with a dog hair, but I can't find it. It wasn't all painted with the dog hair. Again, you know, you start big, start huge, big paintbrushes, and then you kind of put more and more highlights and lowlights until eventually you get where you're painting with a dog hair. So this is an oil painting about 4 foot by 4 foot of a pile of Victorian books that I have, but the fine bits were painted with a dog hair. So you don't always have to have and all cheaper brushes, big bristled cheap brushes, and a dog hair. It seems to be out of focus, that. Just a second, I have another one. Oh, that's better. The other one was out of focus. So that's a painting I did about 5 years ago, but I can't do oil paints. But that, the frayed edges were painted with a dog hair. So if you're doing some really fine work, it is a bit thinged out a bit. So you don't have to use anything traditional. You can find. I don't envisage you getting a fly and pulling the hairs off the back of a fly. I've forgotten the guy's name. If you look on YouTube, there's a guy that paints with hairs very fine. He paints under a microscope with a hair from a fly. So that's how I used to do quite detailed work, and that's why I find wishy-washy colouring very, very difficult, because I'm a bit of a tight Yorkshire lass. So you could buy an ordinary brush and then cut the bristles off. I mean, you could even buy one of these And if you cut all the outside ones, you could just leave, you know, come out. My hands don't work very well, hence, you know, you can leave one hair or two hairs, and you can just cut all the others off. Or you can cut them shorter, and so you just, I mean, that's just one hair. That, if you can just see that hair. So you don't have to, you know, buy cheap brushes for 99p or $1, and then just, you know, cut them off and leave what you want. And that's going to act like a rigger. It's going to be for very fine work, for very long dog whiskers or hairs. Have I broken chat again? And if you really wanted to, you could use really fine brushes for this work as well. This is quite a nice one. It should go to a point, but it won't anymore because I've been using it quite a lot. In fact, it's about time I bought another one. It's quite a nice fine point, is that one. But I tend to use the riggers. I tend to use the riggers again because they're fine. But I used to use these. I haven't even looked at these for a good, just bear with me 2 seconds. I need to get up. Yes, I'm up, Alfie. Oops. These were my go. Oh, that's where that one is. I wondered where that's poppy red, I think, isn't it? It's been missing, chili red. It's been missing for ages. Now I know where it is. So these are my brushes that I've used a lot. And the sable ones, these are my watercolour brushes that I hardly ever use. But I didn't buy them from there. I buy some cheaper ones. My daughter paints with these. This is a very fine one. Oopsie. I don't paint with these. I've got 3 of these Series 7. I don't paint with those. This one is a Fabric 50 from Germany. Probably about 99p. And it's been used with oils and acrylics. I use the same kind of, I've got some bits, that glue that I've got everywhere. So that's quite a fine one, is that one. This one is a 10-0 Graduate Daler Rowney, and it's a spotter, but it's a small one. This one is a Humbrol 50. Again, go to model shows and I find the small. But if you look at the 10-0, that's the 50 that's actually broken now. But the 10-0s in that 55 series is quite small. What's this one? This one is, this is a Series 7 Sable. So I do have a fine one actually. I don't think I've ever used it. I could put that in there. I think my daughter might want to play with these. So these are both Series 7. And it doesn't go to a point. So, and I've never used it, so I don't know why it doesn't go to a point. Fine Sable Winsor & Newton Series 7. They're very expensive for those. Can I get both those in at once? No, can't. I might put that somewhere else actually. Because my daughters sometimes rush in. This is Series 33. So I do have some good brushes, but I do tend to find I like the cheaper ones. These are Cotman 30. That's a fine one. That would get some very nice little spots in there. So I think nowadays you don't have to spend a lot. It says this one's a 30 Pure Sable. That's quite a nice little tiny one. This one looks completely wrecked. Sable Synthetic Winsor & Newton 40, but very tiny, very tiny. I might actually start trying to use these again now. Anybody got any questions? Oh, bye Melody, thanks for stopping by. So I haven't put any colour on hers there, so I'm going to take this colour here. And remember what I said last time about not being completely fast. Oh, tell a lie. Oh, there's a tiny bit coming off, just a tiny bit, just enough to give me a shadow. Just the tiniest amount, so that all that wasn't set, but it's giving me a really natural highlight. And that's what it's about. It's about manipulating, and I forgot to put that on my hand. So again, manipulating that colour down for the shadow. And really you wouldn't want to be scrushing around too much with lovely sable brushes like this, because you will wreck them. So again, tight Yorkshire lass. You get more fun out of a cheaper brush than you do sometimes. I mean, if you're doing a professional watercolour, then you want a really nice brush, but for colouring in. So again, just manipulate that colour. And of course this is Inktense, so it's going to do this. The Caran d'Ache are kind of very well pigmented as well, so they're going to give you a really nice effect when you colour in with those as well. Again, I'm taking that from underneath and spreading it out. So you've got to be fairly quick with these, because again, they're not forgiving. If you don't get this in one, you're not going to be able to go back to it. It's not very forgiving because it's going to set. Whereas if it was watercolour, Caran d'Ache, art bars, Derwent watercolour pencils, Faber-Castell, and any other water-based medium that you've scratched on, so it's in crayon or pencil. If you got it to this stage and thought, oh, actually I want to do it again, you can go back into it, but you can't do that with these Inktense, because they are almost nearly always set perfectly fine. So again, another practice page, photocopy a page and have a go, and then by the time you've finished you'll be quite proficient at it. If that's, I always remember Judi Dench on Pride and Prejudice saying I would be most proficient. I don't know why, it just reminds me of I would have been proficient. If that's the correct pronunciation. I'm a bit like Hilda Baker, I get my words mixed up. I think it's something to do with the fibro, so if I say something completely wrong, do forgive me. It's because I've heard something and then got it completely wrong. So I quite like this kind of steel blue grey colour. It's just coming out quite nice. Oh, has Derwent got a colour book out? Oh, sorry, yes, Derwent have colouring books. Yes, yes, they have. Yep, they have. Sorry, yes, I do apologise. Yes, they have some colouring books. I saw them when I went the first year. Yes, Derwent have colouring books, but I don't think I can afford any more colouring books. I think my family will leave home, because I think I spent £12 on 4 colouring books, and I thought I'd done really well. And my daughter went crackers and said, "Mother, you do not need any more colour books." So I will be taking back 2 of the colour books. I think the Terry Pratchett book, Terry Pratchett? No, Terry Pratchett. What were the books that I bought the other day? Dear memory. Tolkien's World. So I need to take those back because I can't have them. But I'm going to keep the fairy colouring book and the butterfly book, I think. Oh, I've got to keep remembering to put that over because it will smudge. So if we're lucky, we can take a little bit of this and manoeuvre it about. And that's given us a very soft highlight. Because this leg's in shadow. So I'll pan out a little bit and you can see the difference in what I've done. Just bear with me a second. So that's where we've got to. So we've got some quite vivid colours and we've got a little bit of shaded, and then we've got this. So I'm going to change to a bigger brush, and you can see how easy it is to manipulate. Is anybody else? Am I still live? Hopefully so. Move down here. The light might be slightly better there, I think. Possibly. It was sunny outside and then it's kind of gone a bit dull, so we're having some strange weather here. So I'm quite impressed that it's a very quick way of working. Is this very quick? I mean, I thought some of the other pages I've done are fairly quick, but this is ultra quick. Which is quite nice because some pages take hours and hours, but again, I like the fact I work differently in different books. I like the fact that the Harry Potters take me hours and hours to do. So I quite like that. But then, you know, this can take an hour or so, a couple of hours. And again, that's something to do with not messing about with colours and thinking about everything has to be exact. Matching colours up can take a good hour. And it's fun to do it. It's nice to do that, but you don't always want to do that all the time. It's, you know, it would be tedious if I spent 8 or 10 hours on a page. You know, it would be, and I would never finish any colour books. So it's quite nice the fact that we can manipulate some colours quickly, and some pages lend themselves to be done quickly, and some lend themselves to be kind of, with pastel, being quite arty with them. And I like that because I miss being an artist. I miss creating my own art. It's rather difficult to colour other people's art when you want to do your own. It's rather strange, but I cannot hold a pencil or a pen to draw my own images. I was thinking, oopsie, I've got some red on there. Don't know where I've got the red from. Oh, that's the colour that I put in. So you see, I've made a mistake. That colour is not the colour I thought it was. Oh, it is. I must have touched it, but it's very vibrant. It's that maroon colour. So again, push the colour around. But I might put a little bit more on. It's not quite as dark as I wanted it, so and it's rather kind of childrenish, rushed a bit, this. I think I could have put a little bit more colour on. But I did say it's easier to do it this way than the other. If you'd have put too much on, it would have been more difficult to get it off. So it's probably better to do this and then find out that actually you'd like it a bit darker or a slightly different colour than to do it the other way and find that you're stuck with it. Whoopsie, I've just wet the page completely, which wasn't clever. So I quite like the fact it's a bit ghosting round her legs, I think, but it's a bit childlike, too childlike for me, this, really. I like to have more control. So I'm going to leave it to dry overnight so it's really, really dried, and then probably go back in there with some darker just to kind of give it a bit more kind of... I always think this looks more kind of childish colouring in. But I can go back in there, so... And I like this paler colour actually, I think. But it's the first time I've played with them, it's the first time I've had a real go on something quite so wet, so you know, you've got to play with your new products, because that's the only way you're going to learn. You can watch people do all sorts of things, but when it's in your own hand, the paintbrush might be slightly different, the water might be slightly different, the pressure on the colour might be slightly different, so there's lots of things to take into account. So because I've activated most of that now, so have we got any questions? And it's crinkling a bit. I did want this to be quite pale, this side. So yeah, I'm not a fan of water brushes, not really, but it's a quick page. So I'm going to have to go over that a bit because I've got a really nasty bit up there that I don't like. But I'm sure it'll be okay. The idea is there. I'm just going to darken it up, but it's crinkled. It's crinkled, but it'll be fine. I've completely missed that bit there. I don't know why. So yep, it's crinkled, and I've used it quite wet there, and it's crinkled, but not overly. You know, it's dry now, so it wasn't that wet. No, that was quite dry, but it was too wet for me. But I like the idea that there's a bit of pale, but I want to get this kind of really dark under here, so I will go over the top, and I will probably use a brush straight from the actual pastel to get some really vivid darkness in there. But it's okay, it's a page. I like the bugs. She'll stand out better, but there's one thing I cannot do now, is touch this. That's a little bit wetter there because I actually did wet that bit. This has got to completely dry. Now it feels dry, but it isn't. If I go back in there now, the page will start to crumble and disintegrate. So I'm going to leave that overnight to completely dry out, and then I can go back into it. And once I made this really dark, she's going to look better. She will look better. She looks a bit at the moment, but she will look better. So I'm not really disappointed. I can play with it tomorrow, but I'm not touching it because that little bit there is wet. And if I went in there now with any kind of brush, it will just mush up into something horrible. So I can leave it, and I can go back into it tomorrow. But most of it's okay. Most of it's okay. But it is a wetter medium. It is a wetter medium. It's not as precise as other kind of pencils and pastels. And I've used it wetter as well. So yeah, there is different things that you use for different spaces. And it worked really well in this book. But for big backgrounds, you need it to be a little bit kind of stronger, I think is the word. So that's the end of part 2. Thank you for watching.